This is What I Know to Be True So Far, the show that inspires you to awaken the magic within and consciously create a life and business on your terms. Join me and my guests as we share awakened experiences, the life lesson wisdom bites, and sacred practices that we've learned along the way to consciously creating the life we love. I'm your host, Kerry-Ann McKenzie, a multi-passionate magic maker, soul-led self-development expert, creative, nature connector, entrepreneur, and mother of 3 beautiful children and 1 very witchy black cat. I'm so grateful to have you with me on the journey with what I know to be true so far. Hello and welcome to the show, Siobhan. It's so nice to have you here. I am going to let you introduce yourself because I'm still a little nervous, as I was talking off camera before, about interviewing you because I'm such a super fan. So can you please share with my audience who you are, all of your work, and the beautiful things you bring to this world?
Oh, thank you, Kerry Ann. It's so lovely to be here. It really is. So I'm Siobhan Mac Mahon. I am a poet, and I write and have been writing about the sacred feminine really for nearly 30 years, and our connection to the earth. And yeah, that's what I do. I also run workshops sometimes, working mainly with women on trusting and finding the words to express themselves through poetry and word. Yeah, that's me, really. That's what I do. That's who I am. Yeah.
Anyone who does not know your work should go and find it. I will be leaving links for everyone to go and discover you because I think you have such a gift for sharing with your work beautiful things that inspire other people to live more in themselves and to own more of themselves. And I know you because I came across a poem that was shared on a reel, and I listened to the poem, and I think it was in 2020, like in the thick of the pandemic. I'm pretty sure it was around the start of that. And it was circulating on the internet. And I saw it and I was like, this is exactly what I've always needed as far as advice goes. And the poem was called Advice for My Daughter. And when I found that poem, I was in such a heavy space in my life and I used to just read it every day, every day. And then I went through my separation. And as I went through my separation, I had like highs and lows, and every low I had, I'd just wake up and I would read that poem. And I moved across the country, and when I moved across the country, one of my dearest friends actually went and bought and got an actual copy of the poem, which I now have framed in my home, and I read it all the time. Still, it sits in my little altar area, and it's where I go and tune in case I forget who I am. I was wondering, would we be able to share a little bit about this poem and advice for my daughter and how you channeled that work or how it came through to you?
Oh, thank you, Kerry Ann. That is really lovely because it honestly means the world to me when a poem touches people, moves people, means something to them. Because, we sit around us poets, like writing our poems on our own, and and then of course we go out and share them. But when somebody talks about, yeah, that it moves them or touches them, it just means the world actually, because then we know that. But in a sense, what it is, I suppose, for me, like there's the writing of the poem, and then there's the editing of it and putting it together, and then there's the performing of it, putting it to words. But it's when it's shared, that's when the magic happens, I suppose, for me as well, because there's something about, we were talking just earlier about Lakshmi, weren't we? And the giving and the receiving. There's something about when I give a poem out, then I receive back so much more than I, in a sense, in a way that I've even given.
Mm.
And so yeah. So where did the poem come from? I have no idea. um, I keep journals all the time, and I jot down things all the time, and then sometimes it's like I think, oh, that's maybe a few lines of a poem or a beginning of a poem, and then I'll go back to it. And there's a poet over here, a wonderful poet called Paula Meehan, and she talks about the compost that you have, you know, like your journals, and it is like compost, you know, and it's like, then I'll go back to it and I'll go, oh, there's something there, and I think, oh, that's good, or oh, I like that, or I might do something with that, and then I'll kind of work on it a bit, and then I'll often leave it again. And sometimes I leave things for months, sometimes I leave things for years, and I go, oh, I could do something with that. So I kind of work in a very ad hoc way, really. I very rarely sit down to write a poem. Now, I will, when I have a poem in a kind of a first draft, or you know, a beginning of it, I will then sit down to work on it and edit it, and you know, there's a process to that. But that poem, I was doing a master's over here in Dublin. I've recently moved back to Dublin after 35 years, can you imagine? In the UK, and I came back a few years ago to do a master's in creative writing, and I was looking through my journals, and I came across that, and it was like, it was one of those poems that came nearly fully formed, and that's actually quite unusual, because usually I just get a line or two, and then you kind of work on it, and then, you know, and but that poem, yeah, it kind of came nearly fully formed, which was interesting. And there were a couple of lines I thought, oh, did I write that? Or did I write that? Where did that come from? So I don't know. It's a mysterious process where poems come from. Over here we've got an expression called imbas ferochni, which is Irish. And now I came across that. There's a wonderful poet here called Laura Murphy. She goes by Eve Rose on social media. She's a beautiful mystical poet, and I came across that actually because she was talking about it. And what it means is inspired illumination. And it was something that the Fili, that's the name for the poets over here, the ancient poets of Ireland, they would go into a whole ritualistic space, and I suppose it's a shamanic space, really. And they would then receive imbast ferochnis. They would received inspired illumination, which then went into their poetry and then became a gift of healing for the community. You know, that's what it was for, to guide the community. Because I mean, I think that's what poetry is there for, you know. So I think that's what poems are. They're a gift. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have to work on them, and it doesn't mean I kind of see myself. I've always had this vision of like a little carpenter's shed, and you know, all the tools. My father-in-law used to have a shed like that, and all the tools beautifully lined up, and everything labeled, and everything ready to go. And he had all the skills to kind of put things together and make things and that. So I think as a poet, or whatever you do, you have to practice your skills, don't you? You have to keep doing it, and you have to have your tools ready and all that. But then the inspiration, so that when the inspiration comes, or when there's a moment of inspiration or a moment of imbas, that then you can have your tools as sharp and as beautiful and as you can, so that you can make the best out of it. So to me, like, the poems contain this, maybe this wisdom or this knowing or whatever it is inside of them. And my job is to try and find the words to wrap around that, so that then when I speak them, or when they go out into the world, they kind of make the invisible visible through the words, if that makes any sense at all. So that's a very long answer to where it came from. And I suppose it's called Advice for My Daughter, and it is, I do have a daughter, and it is, you know, it is for her, and for all the young women in the world, but it's, you know, it's also for me, you know, and it's also for my younger self. I wish I had a poem like that when I was younger, you know. So it's also for my younger self to remember that. And yeah, so sorry, I'm rambling now.
I love the rambling. I'm all here for the rambling. I could just sit and listen to you ramble all day long. So when we speak about like inspiration and creativity and like where the flows come from, do you feel like it's something like you've got the tools to bring it all together, but where do you think it initially comes from? Like the sparks, do you feel like there's bodies of works that are just waiting to be birthed through someone that float around. I've heard a philosophy, I think it was in The Big Magic, and it was, there's all these creative ideas or these things that want to be birthed, and they kind of flow around, and then every now and then someone tunes in and channels into it, and they can bring that work forward. Do you find any of that, or do you agree with that philosophy of this idea that there's these, projects, so to speak, wanting to be birthed all the time, and they're just looking for the container or the conduit, to bring that work forward?
Yeah, I would accord with that. Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine who's a visual artist, she talks about there being like this great tapestry, and then
Mm,
every now and then she kind of, she'll reach up, or one of the threads will come down for her to be able to weave into something. So I
mm,
think, in a sense, like any of the wisdom, if you like, in the poems that I bring forward is not my small little Siobhan wisdom. This is and
mm,
when I started writing a long time ago, now about 25, 30 years nearly ago, um, I I was in a very dark period of my life actually when I started writing, and the poems were um, they became like a kind of a breadcrumb trail out of a very dark forest, and they were like moments of light,
mm,
and I would just put them down on the page, and I knew that there was something, because they were all about the sacred feminine and the reclamation of our voices, and the undoing of the kind of patriarchal narratives and all of that stuff.
yes.
And I knew it was powerful, I knew it was important, but I didn't really have any real understanding of it. So it
Mm,
was like, it was, it was, I suppose in a way, it was a great gift given to me in order to help me out of a very, very dark place. And then that gift, then when it's shared, then also, brings the light hopefully to other people. So it's yeah, I think inspiration is, I think it comes from the divine, from the great spirit, from the sacred feminine. We all have great consciousness, whatever you want to call it. I
yes.
think, and I think it's unendingly creative.
Mm,
It's unendingly bountiful and creative.
mm,
Yeah, and we live in this awful world that seems to think that everything is limited, and um, and everyone's fighting everybody else because there's not enough and all this. But actually, creativity is it's so important, isn't it? Because it reminds us that we are bountiful human beings, yeah, full of creativity. But I do think also we do have to make the space for it, don't we?
oh,
Because if,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yes, 100%. I think that there's two things that I forget. Well, actually, there's three things, and I've got them written on my mirror so I don't forget. And one is that I'm an artist, and the other is that nature is my home and where I need to go to. And sleep, without sleep and meditation, I am not a nice person to be around. So they're the things that I kind of draw on, but I have to remind myself constantly, like, make the time for that, because when you are, for me, I get channeled into my magic through those things, when I'm in nature, when I'm creating something, or I'm expressing my artist within. And when I'm getting enough sleep and when I'm meditating, they're the things that activate actually all the magic within me and allow me to create what it is that I want to create for my whole life. But when we don't make space for it, I feel like it knocks on the door, and it's like a rude awakening for me, especially with creativity. Like if I go too long without creativity, it's almost like it's calling me, and I will wake up at 1 a.m. and I have to make something and I have to create something to get it out, to like do it. So I try to make space for it, but I'm also similar in the essence of using creativity as a way to process my emotions. And my auntie was really sick earlier this year, and I put my hand up to be the person to be with her while she transitioned as much as I could, because she didn't have a lot of family that were able to be here. And the night I came home and I realized it was horrific what was happening to her in the nursing home, I just had so much pain and anger and frustration, and I just needed to make and create and express. And I stayed up all night long. I didn't sleep at all. and I just made art for the sake of making it, for the sake of processing and crying and feeling all of my feelings, but allowing them to be expressed. And I did flowers, and I did, print work and just random things. And my partner woke up and there's just like this house, this trail, of me like everywhere being creative, because I think that creativity is such an empowering tool for anyone who is going through heavy emotions, but also going through really inspirational, bright, lighter emotions as well. And I wish that more people understood that, whether you're an artist or not, whether you're a writer or not, whether you make music or not, just the simple act of even making a meal can be a creative process for you that can help you express your soul's essence through its creativity. And I think the soul's always trying to be heard and expressed. And the way that it can do that, that's really easily, is through creativity.
Absolutely. Oh, 100%. And if only our governments would listen to that and change the education system a bit and let our kids be creative, because the whole system is kind of designed to make us kind of good workers for the patriarchal capitalistic society, you know what I mean? And then to achieve a lot and then we die. And it's like, okay, well, that's not really what we're here for, is it? We're here to be creative and
Yeah.
to share our creativity and to let the inspiration through, as you say, in whether that's in gardening or cooking or whatever it is, and kids know that. I mean, don't they? Children know that, and so I think now more than ever, and it is interesting at the moment, isn't not interesting, but we're living in really dark and difficult times, aren't we? There's a lot of a lot of destruction and despair and war on the planet, and sometimes I think it can feel a bit like, well, what's the point in writing a poem? That's not going to stop a war,
Mm.
Um, and also, I believe in a way, no, well, not in a way. I suppose I believe that the way to, rather than fighting the destruction, if you like, or with more aggression and more kind of anger, I think the role of the creative is to grow the light, to grow the beauty, you know. So instead of fighting the darkness, we grow the light and grow the beauty. And I think so. I think it is important. Actually, I think creativity is hugely important at the moment. And I do have, even though the world's in a terrible state, I have such great faith for the world. I do. I believe. And I think this is partly one of the gifts of being being a poet, is that there's a lot of beauty comes through in some of my poems, and I think, well, that beauty is, that's there. That's, we're all a part of that. That's a part of us. That beauty is dying to be born in us and on this earth. So yeah, so I think we have to bring beauty. And I'm not saying in creativity we can also, go into the dark and the deep and the shadows and transform and transmute that. And that's really important too. And some of my work does go very dark, but always in order to try and bring the light.
And there's
Yeah.
something through that as well. When you start to see the world more creatively, I feel like there's a different lens in which you see the world. I feel like when I'm in my doing and my busyness, and I'm kind of like moving around, just getting things done. I mean, solo mum with 3 kids, and I'm trying to run a business. Like, it's easy for me to just get caught up in all the actions. And I was saying to you before, like I'm definitely more in my masculine naturally through survival and all of that from when I was younger. So when I step into my feminine and have that aspect of creativity, I see the world differently. And I go out and I look at a leaf, and I'm not looking at a leaf, like I am in there, and I am like fully absorbed in like how amazing and miraculous it is that it even exists, not to mention all the fine details and the colors and what happens to that leaf next and what will its journey be. And, like you see the world differently when you have a lens of creativity, and you are able to tap into the beauty so much easier, which lets you feel the beauty all around you and have that appreciation for it. And when we have that, I feel like it makes it a little bit easier to live in a world that's not looking so bright, but to still hold the hope and hold that light for a better world, and to trust that there's a possibility for us here to go back to living in such a higher state of consciousness, in alignment with nature and alignment with creativity. Friends with nature is like a big thing for me. Like, if I feel like if we just went into nature, sat for half an hour and made a drawing or made notes about what it is we see, that's such a different way to be in the world. And it helps you then when you're faced with all of the destruction that we're faced with, it makes it a little lighter. And so I really resonate with what you were saying about that process and seeing the world through a lens of beauty. And when you write and you're writing from that place of beauty, because you describe things in such a unique way through poetry. And I'm so wanting to be a poet at some stage in my life. In fact, yesterday I was driving in my car and I was feeling very like disconnected from nature and disconnected from having some time to myself. And I could hear the trees calling me and speaking to me. And I stepped out of the car and this little cute, sweet little poem came in and I wrote it down and I was like, oh, I'm going to go and put that on social media because, and I did it this morning and I was like, I'm going to put it on there because today I'm interviewing a poet and I have this secret desire to study poetry. I think it's inspirational when there's people who can create such beautiful moments of movement in your soul through a few words. When you are in that space, what is it that allows you to do that easily? For someone who's not a natural poet, what advice could you give to someone to help them write about what they see through the lens of beauty, or to use words subtly to evoke that emotion in another person?
Well, I'm delighted you're writing. Have you got your poem there?
I've got it on my Trello.
Are you going
Yeah,
to read it?
I mean, I'm going really
What?
red and I'm really blushing. I do have it. I can find it for you. And it is
Yeah,
like it felt very childlike for me, if that makes sense. It felt like a children's
yeah,
reminder almost for me. So
yeah.
it's definitely not like an advanced poetry. It's very
No, no,
AV.
no, we don't. No, we don't talk about advanced. That there's a whole lot of, excuse my expression, bollocks about poetry. Do you know what I mean? And I get really pissed off with this. I like there's a kind of a literary thing, you know, and it's like, oh well, let's make a poetry really difficult, and then nobody can understand it, and then they'll feel stupid. And it's like, no, 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 no. Poetry is not about that. You know, I really hate the whole kind of elitist literary thing that
Mm,
people feel. And you know, every time,
yeah.
anytime I've ever given a workshop, people are afraid of poetry.
Yeah, I
They're
am
afraid of it.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people are afraid of it. They think it's this elite kind of sport, you know, and that you have to be really, really clever and you have to use words in a particular way. And that's all bollocks, actually. I really do. Now, I'm not saying we don't practice our craft, and I'm not saying we don't,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, yeah. But, you know, poetry is the language of the soul.
Yeah.
So to write a poem is to connect to your heart and your soul. And
Mm,
then I mean, how I write, I'm really messy writer, you know, like I bung it down. That's what I always say. Don't bung it down before the critical mind gets a say, you know,
yeah.
because the critical mind will come in and go, oh, that's not very good. Oh, that's not a real poem. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I still have a critical mind. It sits here, you know, for feck's sake, you'd think at 63 I'd have got rid of it, but it's still there. But I do manage to just put it down, and then whatever comes. And then like sometimes I'll write a line and I'll have words around it and I'll have bits. I go,
Mm,
oh, and it may not make any sense. It may not be in any order or anything. So don't worry about any of that. Whatever
mm,
comes, put it down. Just put it down. And then what I do is I leave it. And this is where the compost we were talking about earlier, because I leave it to
mm,
compost for a while. And then Paula Meehan is a wonderful Irish poet. She talks about that. And um, because I find that when I look at it a little bit later, now it could be, I mean, sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's months, sometimes it's years before I look at something in. I look at it and I go, oh, there's something there. So it's like if I leave it for a while, my critical mind seems to be quieter when I look at it again,
Mm.
and then, I mean, this is just my process, and everybody's process will be different. And then after a while, when I feel ready, I might think, well, I'll try a first draft of that. And then I always write it out by hand first, because I find that once you put it into the computer and you type it, that it becomes a slightly more rigid in a way,
Mm.
so I write it out by hand first, and then I have a page with like all sorts of scrolls everywhere and arrows, and that might go up at the top, and I just put it down and then think, and then sometimes as I'm writing, another line or two might come, and then I'll leave it again. So it's like a
Mm.
long stew, leave it again, and then I look at it again, and then I often have a process, so it's like it's not all roses and inspiration. I often have process like, why am I writing poetry? I can't make this into a poem, and I haven't got a good line, and I get really frustrated. And then I usually go for a walk or wash the dishes or do something ordinary, and then often when I'm doing that ordinary thing, something I think, oh, I know what needs to happen there.
Mm.
um so just whatever comes, put it down, and try not to criticize it, and try not to kill it with cruelty. I
Yeah.
think we can kill our poems, and we can, like poems kind of, they contain something within them, and the words are just like a something we wrap around to make the invisible visible.
Mm.
So we can't bang at them too hard. We have to kind of be gentle with them, I think.
I think I'm definitely critical, and I have this very large, expectation of how hard poetry is going to be and how far away I am from having any poetry in my life. And I don't get some poetry sometimes, and I'm like, obviously I'm missing something. Like I can't understand like the essence of this other poetry I read, and I'm like, wow, that resonates so easily for me. And so I feel like there's that, and there's also this story that I'm really bad at English, because I have a million typos every day. My friend who is, a little bit of a grammar enthusiast, I would call her. I think I drive her crazy with my spelling and grammar. And I didn't learn to fully read and write until I was 14 years old. And so I criticize my writing all the time, which is hilarious, because I write in my marketing business. I write so much content constantly all the time for people who love it and appreciate it. So I'm not sure. I think it's the little girl in me who got a D in English, who feels a little like she can't do this. And so that kind of plays out sometimes. And so yesterday when I had this poem come to me, and I was like, this is kind of like a poem I would see in a children's book or a children's story. And I was like, I still love it fully and completely. And I knew if I held on to it for too long, I would never share it with anybody. So I put it on Instagram in a whim of like, just do it. You've got to say things when you feel them. So yeah, I've got it here. I don't know if I'll be able to read it in a nice flow, and the critical mind will probably be there the whole time, but I can read it for you if you like. I had a thought, I was like, oh no, I can't read it for her. And then I was like, wait, dude, it's on Instagram. She's just
Yeah,
gonna hop off the
I
podcast
can
and
read it later.
go and see it. There's no difference. So I can read it for you. And it's about talking to trees. Okay.
Okay, and just say, take your time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
enjoy it. Yeah, you remember the place you felt when the poem came, and just read it from that place. Yeah,
Yes.
trust that.
Thank you. Because my heart's racing a little bit, which I know is so silly, but it feels so very real inside my body. Okay. If I am not careful in my busy humanness, I forget to talk to trees. I feel the gap between me and nature stretch. I sense the deep dis-ease. I crave the smell of eucalyptus, to touch the paper bark. My heart longs for them, to feel their magic spark. I hear the trees begin to call directly by my name. Know me by my name they do, as I know them the same. Come and stand a while, they say, watch our dancing leaves. Place your head against our trunks and feel the autumn breeze. For if you get too busy in all your humanness, the gap will get too wide, my dear, leaving you in stress. Take the time to talk to us. We have so much to say. Allow our golden stream of light to brighten up your day. I close my eyes and feel their words and know that it is time to forget the human busyness for now and take a moment that's mine.
That is beautiful, Carrie-Anne.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I was right. No, it's beautiful. I was right in there with the trees, and you've got a beautiful natural sense of rhythm and uh, rhyme as well. But your rhythm and your rhyme is really very, very natural. But I loved it to touch the paper bark and call me by my name, and oh, it was beautiful. Just read the last few lines again because they were lovely. I mean, they was all lovely, but something about the time, taking the time, just the last, was it 4
I
lines?
close my eyes to feel their
Yeah.
words and know that it is time to forget the human busyness for now and take a moment that's mine.
Oh, that's lovely. I close my eyes. Say that again.
I close my
Do
eyes
it
to
even
feel
do,
their
do it even slower. Do it even slower. Let us kind of, yeah, do it really slowly. Okay, close my eyes.
I close my eyes to feel their words and know that it is time to forget the human busyness for now and take a moment that's mine.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you've got to keep writing. Oh no. It's beautiful. And there's a beautiful do you know the poet Mary Oliver?
Yes, I do. I do know that poem about talking to the birch trees.
Yes, yeah. Well,
Yes.
she's a beautiful poet. But it's like you were saying about somewhat reading some poems, not being able to understand them. So don't read those ones. Read the poets that you love. There's loads of
Mm.
wonderful, extraordinary, beautiful poets, and so choose the ones that you love. I think we were, I know when I was young, I think in school poetry is often kind of rammed into us, and we have to dissect it. And now, what does it mean? And then, by the time you've done all of that, the poem is dead.
Mm.
Poems aren't meant to be dissected and analyzed. They're meant to be felt, and there's a mystery in them that
Mm.
we experience when we read it or when we hear it. And
Mm.
each person will experience their own sense of mystery or connection within it. We're not meant to analyze it. It's a mystery. It's meant to be a mystery.
Mm. And do you think there's an essence of it's subjective in a way to some degree because we're all experiencing those words and what they mean to us differently, the same as we do with music and what it, brings out
Of
in
course
each
it
of
is.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, and different poems will appeal to different people. And I've got a poem I'm going to read to you because I brought it because I know a long time ago I heard you were talking somewhere a long time ago on one of your posts about loving the trees and everything. And I've always thought, oh, I'd like to share this poem with you because of your love of trees. And now you've read one about trees. So and this is a very old poem, but I'm going to read it. So it's again the trees. And it just was funny because there's kind of a resonance between your poem and mine. So the
Amazing.
trees, they have been talking to me, the trees, whispering their mossy secrets buried deep in the soft brown earth, telling me old tales, glistening webs spun on bare branches, shivering in the gloom of the twilight air. They have been calling me softly, the trees, stirring old memories, musty scented promises lost in the dark dripping of the holy woods. On Wiltu Egdalawalya, will you be coming home, they say, and I would if I could, but I do not know the way yet.
Mm.
So on Wheel to Igdala Walia is Irish for Are You Coming Home? And like
Mm.
I wrote that poem donkeys years ago when my kids are like are 28 and 30 now, when they were quite young. And we were visiting this very beautiful site in Ireland called Glendalough. And it's an ancient spiritual site as well. And it's very, very magical. I've always loved it. And I was in a very dark place in my life then. And it was the trees. It was that moment. It was twilight. And it was that moment I was so disconnected from myself, kind of lost out in the haunted regions. And it was the trees. I could feel this, yeah, this communication as if they were reminding me of home. And in the poem it says, are you coming home? And I would if I could, but I do not know the way
Mm.
yet. And I think now maybe I know the way a little bit.
Mm.
But then I didn't. And it was like, oh, yeah, it was the trees they do speak to us,
They
don't they?
absolutely do. In so many ways as well. Like I've never met a person who doesn't have a tree, right? And by the way, that poem was absolutely beautiful. As a tree lover, it really moved me. So thank you so much for reading that. It's absolutely beautiful. But you're right. They talk to us in different kinds of ways. And I think a lot of people are missing this incredible opportunity to have this deep reciprocity with nature and to talk to trees and the wisdom that they hold. And so much of my first early journeys with tree communication was just like thinking I was going crazy, and also questioning, like, is this just my, imagination, or is this really? And I would drag my girlfriends after a tree would tell me how it feels. I would drag my girlfriends and I would say, like, how do you feel when you stand near this tree? And then like see if they matched what the tree would kind of tell me. And I would explore so much of it because it was so hard for me to grasp this concept that we can go out in nature and seek out more of understanding who we are, and also wisdom that is either from God, the universe, a higher place, channeled through the trees. But even that trees have different personalities. So there's some element to them being sentient beings for me. And that's my experience. But I've never met anyone who doesn't have a tree that they can remember, that from their childhood or as an adult or in their backyard, or that they don't go and visit or know of or see. Even the busiest of humans, I'll ask them, at some point in your life, did you feel connected to a tree? And everyone's got a story about their tree somewhere along their journey, and how a tree has helped them in some way, or they felt connected to that tree. And people who buy houses because they loved the tree in the backyard, like there's just so many stories of that. And when I was alone in my tree communication journey, I was like to the trees, I need your help. Like, I need you to connect me to other people that get what's going on, so I don't feel so crazy and I don't feel so alone. And I was really fortunate that the universe or the trees or whatever it was started bringing into my world all these tree communicators. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a normal thing. And yet we don't often talk about it, that it's available to us, and that trees have this interconnection with our breath, but also they love helping us transmute energy that's heavy. And so if you just go and sit with your spine against a trunk, if you're having a really low day, in that moment you'll feel so much less stress and overwhelm, but you'll feel it. There's something that happens there, something that gets transmuted, and there's this energy exchange between us. And I sense it so much. And if I'm either too busy or if I've been drinking wine, I will break that connection really easily. I stopped drinking 10 months ago because I can't have the connection there, and it was making me quite sad. It wasn't as easy for me to communicate with trees. But I think that there are so many people in the world who need to learn about this stuff. I wish I had the courage to be the one to bring it forward, but I do get caught up in the judgment and the worry of what people think, that I'm crazy, like that I go out and I talk to the trees. And I do mention it. I do have a course on tree communication, but I wish I had the courage to fully make it that my mission. And I think that maybe one day I will be able to step into that role and share it more, because it's such a beautiful gift to have, and to be able to come back home to the trees, to be able to find yourself just by sitting amongst the trees. Do you feel like our world has an opportunity now where we can go back to the old ways a little bit and go back to how we used to live in such close connection to nature and to trees?
Yeah, yes. I think it's the only way forward, isn't it? And
Mm.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because when I wrote that, and it was a long time ago, and the first line says they've been talking to me, the trees, and I remember the first time I read it, thinking, oh my God, people are going to think I'm completely mad. Well, I'll just say it's a poem, but so it's a poem, so people will accept that it's a poem. You know what I mean? But it's like, my poems are like, yes, they're poems, but they're really me trying to put language in what I experience.
Yes.
Um, and I think poetry is really good for that, because people will accept a poem, like your poem about the tree. People will accept a poem. If you say, "Oh, I talk to trees," they think, "Oh, you're crazy," you know. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, but there's something about poetry. Poetry kind of it's kind of, it holds a magical language. It holds a memory of a magical language and a magical way of being, doesn't it, in a way?
Mm.
Um, so I think it's really important. The language is really important, because so much of our language, and you see, I write a lot about language and words and narrative, and it's like, and it's there again and again and again in my work. It's like a theme going through it, you know. And I talk a lot about, did you talk about remembering? Yes, call you by your name. And
Mm.
the word, you know, name comes up in my poetry all the time. The
Mm.
holy name, my name, to remember my holy name. And it's like, there's something about, and I can't put it into kind of logical language, but there's something about the name, the naming of things. So how we name them is how we then see them. So if we have the language that names the magic of nature and the connection and our connection to it, and
Mm.
that interwoven connection of ourselves with nature and the whole of the cosmos, if we have the language to still remember that, then we can still remember that it is true, and then maybe we can try and live it a bit more.
I love that.
Because so much of our language is about reducing things and about analyzing things, about taking things apart. You
Mm.
know, you can't take everything apart and find the truth of it, because it's it's much greater mystery than that. All we can do is, yeah, if we can find the language to remember the mystery of things and our interwoven connection, then I
Mm.
think we have a hope of, because when people hear something like your poem, they hear uh, you know, a Mary Oliver poem, they hear a poem, it reminds them. They go,
Yes.
"Oh yes, I know that, I
Mm.
remember that." But then we've had so many centuries of the kind of the rational, conscious kind of, you know, mind going, "No, no, no, that's all rubbish. Put all that away. That's all superstition and rubbish and nonsense," you know.
Mm.
And I think that's something you know, really enjoying about being back in Ireland, is that Ireland still has a connection to the magic
Mm.
and to the land. And that's kind of accepted over here, actually. It
Mm.
is kind of accepted. You know, you go all over the country and you'll still find, you know, fairy trees, and people won't touch those fairy trees, and, you know, areas of magic and, you know, places that holy sacred lands and stuff. And so that it still remembers that the land holds and contains a magic and a wisdom. And,
Mm.
you know, you have that in with the indigenous people in Australia too. The indigenous people all over the world know that, don't they? And it's just us,
Mm.
you know, all the old white colonizers come in and go, "Oh, that's all bollocks, that's all nonsense. No, no, we're gonna have a patriarchal God, and then we're going to
Mm.
divide everything up." And you know, and it's like, no, actually, you know, the land does speak and communicate with us. But yeah, so
Mm.
I do, I have, yeah, I have great hope. I don't know how or when it's all going to happen,
Yeah.
or you know, but I think we're in, like, you know, when you're giving birth
Yeah.
and you get to that bit, the kind of transition bit, you think, "I can't do this," you know, like, this, oh, let me out of here. And I think we're in that bit right now, you
Mm.
know, that bit of birth, um, where we're both birthing and midwifing
Mm.
something new and also something ancient as well, you know, the two together. And you know, you don't know what your baby's going to be like until you meet it. You haven't, you know, you don't know, you know, what your baby will be until you meet it. And in
Mm.
a way, I don't think we can't see,
No.
maybe, but we
Mm.
have maybe glimpses of it. Yeah.
Mm. I
Sorry,
remember.
I'm rambling again. I go off
I
on
know
big
I
long
love your
rambles,
ramblings
don't
because
I?
it's making me think so much about this kind of world that I saw. It was this tiny little baby tree, and I walked over to it, and it was just pulling me and pulling me and pulling me. And I was like, I'm coming, I'm coming. And I was with the tree, and I saw all the land around me being lived in a totally different way. And people were not, it wasn't like we were back in the olden days or anything like that. It was very modern, and it felt almost Scandinavian a little bit in some elements. And there were women carrying baskets of fruit and women carrying flowers, and there was people walking around and sharing and chatting, and I was like, what is this? And the tree was like, this is the possibility. Like, this is what's available. And we had there was these houses in the distance, and they were almost like huts, but they weren't, and they were raised a little bit, but inside everything was like immaculately clean, but also somehow part of every element of nature around it as well. And I was just like, this is phenomenal. Like, if this is possible for humanity, and it feels like the furthest thing from what we're all experiencing right now. But part of me thinks that the waking up and the trees communicating with more and more people, there's people all over the world who are having, you know, these sentient being experiences with trees. I think that's happening now because we need to be more in that space, and we need to come back to the artists within us, and we need to be able to grow our own food and share with our neighbors and have the community again. And I do have like this grand view of what it could be, and my brain's like, imagine what it would have to take, right, to get to that. A lot of things would have to change, but maybe it is just the birthing process, and this is all part of it, and we can only hope that it's leading us to a better quality of life for everybody and a more equal life for everybody on our planet. That's something that I do think that nature can really help us with, and I hope that that's the direction we're going in. And even with AI, I sort of, you know, toss and turn about AI, and I think about AI with creativity, and, you know, what is AI going to do for the world of creativity and our world? And at first I was like, well, obviously it's just going to make people more valuable, you know, like that was my initial response. And everybody I spoke to was like, oh, it's going to wipe everybody out. And I was like, wait, how much more value does a painting have by someone by hand when all you can do is get everything that's auto generated? I now have a very great appreciation for anyone who does a craft by hand. And I hoped that that was kind of how people would see it. But obviously everybody got really freaked out for a while there. And then I started playing with it, and I was like, hang on a second. This is pushing my creativity to go far beyond what it's ever thought before. And that was really interesting for me, because it made me think, oh, it's all happening, and it is out of our control to a certain degree. And it's what we really make of it and what we really allow it to do to us. It can make us redundant, or it can make us push us to these totally new creative realms, and also new levels of appreciation for the craft and things by hand and words written through the craft and spirit together. And what's your whole take on where our planet's moving with creativity and AI?
Oh God, AI. I'm not sure I have a real opinion on it.
Do you
You
think it
could
will
see it as
replace,
being,
do you think it will replace poets at any time?
well, I don't think it can, because AI can't communicate with the divine.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It can't. So
Yeah.
it can assimilate, it can simulate us,
Yeah.
but no, it can't communicate with the divine. The divine can't communicate with it. So I kind of don't get involved in the whole AI conversation, because I could go like, oh God, that's going to be terrible. Because, I think now, whether I'm just being overly optimistic, but I think our role, or my role, is we have to vision the
Mm,
future. We have to dream it
mm,
into being. Because,
mm,
the simplest thing we do, like I want to paint my bedroom, and think, well, I have to imagine it first, don't I? I have to think about what I want, how do I want it to feel, what color do I want, So I have to dream it into being first. And then
mm,
you go through the practical stages. So I think what we have to do is we have to vision, like you had that vision of the world. So I
mm,
think we have to hold the visions we have and
mm,
bring them into being through our poetry and our writing and our dance and our God, whatever it is. I think we have to bring as much as we can the vision into being. And
mm.
I'm just not going to worry about AI because, like, if you worry about all that, I'm just not going to get involved in that because I think it could take me down a big long track, and I think we can get very distracted by all the terrible things that could happen. And in the way our world is in complete madness at the moment, it is complete madness. Like your vision
Yeah.
of unity and working together, and like that's much more, even if you like, on the practical terms, it's much more sensible,
Yes.
vision, because the world we're living in is completely mad. It's gone completely mad, and it's like, so we have to see the possibility of living in a different way, because until we see it and speak it and try and bring it into our own lives, it won't happen unless we have, not saying it won't happen, but we have to. I think, yeah, my job is just to see it and bring it in, and yeah, not to get too involved in, oh, what if, and maybe AI and maybe this, and I'm just not going to go down that, because I think that will just take all my energy.
Yeah,
So,
and it is a rabbit hole when you kind of you can catastrophize that to all kinds of levels. And I chose to build a healthy relationship with it, and I make the practice of not using it for speaking through my soul. Sometimes if I have to write an email to my school about something and I don't have time, I'll just quickly use it for that.
brilliant. Yeah, use it.
Like
I
it's,
suppose also
yeah.
I'm older than you, so I'm not as much into, tech as you are. So you'll probably find a way of using it.
Yes.
Whereas I think I'm thinking, you know what, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. But I think anything that we're trying to express, if we're not doing it from our heart, the person on the other end can feel it anyway. And so it's so interesting for me. I'm like, I think it could be this beautiful opportunity for us to expand our creativity and to think in new ways, because we have different tools to take care of the stuff that doesn't require creativity anymore. And so that's kind of the view that I'm having a look on it. And as far as creativity goes, I think we're always going to favor people who channel their work and do their work that way, as opposed to auto-generated work.
There's
Even
something about that. Yeah, there's something about that, isn't there? I mean, I don't know if there's a project called the Red Dress. I don't know if you know that project. And it's an absolutely beautiful project. And she, quite a few years ago now, the artist got funding, and either she or somebody had made this beautiful red dress, and it has now gone all over the world for women to embroider. I think it's been mainly
yeah,
women embroider on it, yeah. And it now travels over the world as this embroidered dress. But what makes it special is the fact that all of those hundreds of people sat quietly pitching and bringing. There was so there's it's imbued with it, and I think there's something about the human, whether, as you say, whether it's making a meal or whether it's gardening, or there's something about that care being taken over something. It's like when if you go to a fast food restaurant or something, the food
yeah.
tastes dead, doesn't it? It's dead. You can taste it's dead. Whereas if you go somewhere or you cook something yourself, and something is cooked with love, you can feel that
Yes.
in the food. You can feel it, can't you? And so I think we are created to appreciate that, the kind of, if you like, the human channeling, if you like, or bringing through the divine. It's like there's a line of one of my poems talks about, I have sown heaven into the muddy hem of the earth. So it's like heaven and the earth. So the crafting or the making of a meal or whatever it is, there's something about the humanness, that the divine comes through that humanness, and that's where the fusion is. So yeah, that's really, really precious. And I think in a way that people are understanding that. Again, there are a lot of movements on there about slow cooking, and people are appreciating the making of something. Yeah.
And I think that's why ritual is also having its place now, and coming back into a lot of people's lives. Like, I feel like when I sat down for the first time in circle with other women, I remembered something that was deeply in my bones that I had no awareness of. And it was all awake in that moment. And it was like switching on this light. And then using the things that I learned from those women and creating like some element of ritual in my life, and taking that time, even if it's just to sit with, you know, my tea and drink my tea and do a little bit of journaling, or if I'm doing spell work and I'm doing crafting, that kind of energy of being in that very at one frequency with the present moment met by spirit at the same time. I think it's so valuable, and it's so important now more than ever for women to remember that kind of work. And I know that you have beautiful work in this area and in this space of helping women connect or connect back to themselves. What motivates you to help women remember the essence of their femininity?
I suppose it's that giving and receiving again. Because
Mm,
if I'm in a workshop of women who are either maybe who are writing, or but often there's ritual involved. There's always ritual involved,
mm,
because ritual brings us into the present moment.
mm,
It shuts down the busy analytical mind, doesn't it, a little bit? It makes it go a bit quiet, so that
mm,
we can be more present in the beauty of the moment, which then reaches all the way back, doesn't it, to our ancestors, and also reaches forward into the future. So ritual brings us into that place. And I think we are meant to live with ritual as part of our lives. We used to, and we're meant to, because that reminds us of our place and our the great, you know, magnificent, wonderful mystery of our lives that we are living.
mm,
So when I'm with women running a workshop, or in ritual creating, it it just fills me up, you see. It
mm.
it reminds, because when we all get together, so because on our own it's very easy. I mean, one of my worst demons is the demon of self-doubt and, second guessing and all that. It's been with me all my life. And it's like when we gather together, we resonate with each other, and we mirror each other. And so all of our kind of demons and because some of our stuff is personal, obviously, stuff, but also we carry collective stuff, don't we? Because we've had
Yes.
so many centuries of, well, we had all the witch burnings, and we had all of those, and we've had a very, very brutal
Mm,
annihilation and suppression of the sacred feminine, and certainly a lot of my early work was about that. And
mm,
it's been really, really brutal and systematic. And so I think, as you say, we remember, don't we? It's not that we're not creating something new. I mean, we
yes.
are creating something new, but we're also remembering something that we know, and thinking, well, how do I remember something that I didn't even kind of rationally know? But we
Yeah.
do. So when I gather with other women to do this, and also what I love is to see the light in another woman begin to shine. It's so incredibly beautiful, and that helps my light to shine more strongly. So I leave after a workshop feeling filled up with light myself.
Mm,
So it's, and hope and inspiration, and there's something so I do it in order to be in community, to connect, to there's something very powerful about us coming together, isn't
mm.
there?
I agree.
Yeah,
I think that
yeah,
it's one of those things that you have to experience it. And when you do, it is like a light switching on that's been dimmed for a really long time. There's no other way I can really explain it. It just switches something on inside of you. And I think there's a sense of the community of that as well. It's like a sense of belonging, and it's like this beautiful, like, this is how we used to do it. Like this, we didn't, we just used to, this was it. And I
yeah,
think that I remembered so much from, I used to do spell nights years ago, and through those experiences, it woke something up in me. It woke the tree communication, it woke my ability to be intuitive, which I had squashed my whole life because I didn't want to be the weird kid. I just used to hide it and squash it. And so this gave me this space to be okay, and not even okay, to love this part of myself that I just shut down for such a long time. And I think the feminine is always trying to live through me more, and I get caught up sometimes in the masculine, and then I have this moment where I just kind of let go, and I'm like, oh, I don't even need to try, because I'm so held and supported in the energy that's within me that I've just kind of squashed down with all my doingness. And the moment I stop, I realize and feel it, and I know it so deeply within myself that the feminine aspect of me is the aspect of the part of me that I've denied my whole life. And the moment I give it the light, it lets me go all the way. It lets me go all the way into this beautiful space of, yes, creativity, but as a mother and as a partner and all of these areas. And it makes life easier. And I hope that and I was saying to you before we jumped on the call, I hope that aspect of me keeps developing, because it's given me that strength too, to really own who I am. Whereas before, I think I used to hide a lot of who I was. And now I feel like there's this feminine aspect that's strong and is fire and is like powerful. And that's a new element of femininity that I'm exploring at the moment. So
yeah, that's fabulous. And I think when we come together, we support each other in that, don't we? And we really need that. We need community. And you're talking about the masculine, and it's really interesting because, like, I mean, years ago, I trained and qualified as an architect originally. So that's quite,
wow.
and yeah, I know. I mean, I never intended to be a poet. It was never on my radar, it just kind of happened because the poems got me out of a dark place, and that then anyway. But I was an architect, and I had embraced my masculine, because I'm 63 now. I grew up in a quite a repressive Ireland, very Catholic, very repressive, all the rest of it. And I could see that women had no power and no say and no voice. And I thought, well, I'm not having that. I suppose in a way I wanted the masculine path because I didn't know at that time in my 20s. I didn't know that there was any other path. I could see women had no power, no voice, no say. So, okay, I'm gonna be as good as the men. I'm gonna, and I did all of that and did all that, and it wasn't until a very deep crisis in my life that I even began to understand that there may possibly be a different path. Because back there, like 30 years ago, there wasn't really much internet. There was no social media. There was no real mention of the sacred feminine. And I was writing this stuff, and I'm thinking, oh, what is this, And then I started calling it the sacred and feminine, and I'm thinking, well, am I allowed to put those two words together? It's like, and it was like, I kind of felt I was doing this strange thing that was really weird. And, but I just had to do it. And that was me discovering the sacred feminine, But what's been really useful for me in the last couple of years, there's a wonderful woman, if any of your listeners want to look her up, called Mary Kennedy, and she, Mari Kennedy, and she runs the Celtic Wheel, which is the indigenous Celtic system of the wheel of the year and all the seasons and stuff. And she runs that online for women over a year, and it's just amazing. And I did it last year, but she talks really well about the masculine and the feminine, and because we're now in the masculine time of the year, we're coming in, we've done the dark feminine and all the rest of it, but she talks about the masculine being the one that, so we go into the dark time of the year, and we kind of get our the feminine time of the year, and then when the masculine comes, see, I always just think he would kind of go off on his own, the masculine. I'm thinking, oh, I'm not sure I like the masculine time of the year. But no, she talks about the masculine being in service to the feminine. So the masculine energy of, dynamism and getting things done and, all that kind of, if you like, masculine energy, but it's in service to the feminine. I thought, oh, right. So I don't have to get rid of the feminine. So the masculine is in service to the energy of the feminine. And so that really helped me
Love that.
with kind of the two. And, if anything, I need probably a bit more masculine again in order to bring my feminine energy and wisdom into the world, actually. So it's,
That's so
I think we've had
fascinating. It's
such a
really
skewed
fascinating.
version of the masculine, haven't we? We've had such a toxic masculine. I mean, I have a son, a beautiful son who's 30, as well as a daughter. And, I think, our men have had such a toxic view of what it is to be a man that is
Yeah.
so destructive for them as well. And
So,
I see beautiful men like my son and other beautiful men in the world who are doing the work and rediscovering the
mm,
true sacred masculine. And
mm,
there's no, then when we have the true sacred masculine and the true sacred feminine, then there's a beautiful union
mm,
between the two. There's no competition, there's no dominance. It's only the old patriarchal idea of a kind of a, they created this very toxic view of what it meant to be a man. And
yeah.
it's so destructive. And we see that playing out all over our world, don't we?
Mm. And I find that the balance between the two is the sweet spot for me, like the really good balance. And I allow, because I do have that very action orientated part of me, I allow it to support the birthing of whatever the feminine is trying to create. And so I
Beautiful.
like that so much. And I kind of even recently with a program that I started teaching, it's looking at the two different aspects of, you need to have this part in order to support this part, and this part is the creation part, and this part is the bringing it to being part, and then together you can actually create really amazing things. But with all the creativity, if there's no action in there to help it be birthed, it just sits there and it just, it just moves around. It doesn't actually come out into the world. So you do have to channel that masculine energy to be able to support all of the feminine creativity and ideas and stuff. So that resonates with me so much. It makes
Beautiful.
so much sense of what I've been trying to kind of actually put across and not had quite the right words for it. So yeah, that's amazing. I've taken up a
Yeah.
lot of your time, by the way. I'm going to have to let you go so that you can get on with your day and I can get into some mode of winding down for the evening. But I thought before you went, if you have another poem that you wanted to share with us, so you could do so.
I can now. I have a powerful poem called Blasphemy, or I can do Advice for My Daughter. Which would you like?
Oh, can you do advice for my daughter? I'll try not to cry.
Advice for My Daughter. They will try to keep you small. They will warn you about the dangers of being too loud, too clever, too wise, too ambitious, too much. They will mutter words darkly under their breath, such as strident and over-emotional, hormonal and oversensitive. They will threaten you with ancient memories of asylums and burnings. They will issue dire warnings about upsetting the apple cart, about gaining a few pounds, about dressing like a tart. Ignore them all. Don't play by their rules. You'll never win. Make up your own rules. Tip the whole feckin' cart over and make cider from its sweet juices. Throw a wild party. Invite your sisters and your brothers. Put your red dress on and dance until dawn on the dying embers of the patriarchy. Speak your beautiful mind. Flaunt your wild wisdom. Be a brazen hussy with the truth that you know encoded in your DNA. Hear generations of women rising from their forgotten graves, applauding you, clapping their bony fingers in delight. Go on, girl. Get up on your high horse. You'll have a magnificent view from there.
Oh, it's so amazing. It's just the most amazing poem. And I wish I could really express the amount of gratitude for you reading that. It means so much to me, and I'll probably listen to it a million times, and it will always make me cry. It makes me cry when I read it, it makes me cry when I read it to my daughter. I've cried and cried and held on to it as this glimmer of hope when I've had my darkest days. So thank you so much for sharing that beautiful poem with my audience. And before you go, a question that I love to ask everybody, all of my guests, of all that you have experienced in life so far and everything that you have journeyed through and everything that you have done, what is the most valuable lesson or the one thing that you know to be true so far?
It's that beauty is at the deepest heart of us all,
Mm,
actually. Beauty and truth and and purity, that's the truth. The truth is beautiful. That the truth is always beautiful,
Mm, mm.
always beautiful.
I
That's, yeah, and yeah, I think that's it.
I love that so much. And for anybody who wants to come and find you and explore your world and do your workshops, do you do online workshops?
Well, not at the moment. No, I mean, I'm on Instagram, Siobhan Mac Mahon Poet. That's where you'll find me. I do need to get a website. I'm not very good at all that kind of stuff. It's on my list. I I'm not running workshops at this moment, because I've just, recently relocated my whole life and changed
Yeah.
it all and come back to Ireland. So I'm kind of finding my feet with what I'm doing. Um, but I'm giving a talk, or a pre-recorded talk on the Glastonbury Goddess Festival, so you'll find me there this summer. And yeah, so just Instagram really is the place to find me at the moment. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time and for coming on today. I really thoroughly just appreciate it so much. And I'm so grateful for all of my listeners that get to find you and your work and the magic that you do in the world.
Thank you, Kerry Ann. It's been an absolute delight and a pleasure. And good luck with everything you're doing. Keep shining your beautiful light.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.